Story 1, The Gas Station Cooler. I hadn't planned on stopping. The fuel gauge was flirting with empty, but I'd done worse stretches before. Still, there was something about the heat that day. It wasn't just hot, it was wrong. The kind that doesn't feel like sunlight anymore, just wait. Like the air itself was tired of being air. The station looked dead even from the road. Sign barely hanging, letters peeled off like sunburnt skin. Gas and sip, maybe once. Now just _A___S_P. A coyote skeleton lay off to the side, ribs tangled in tumbleweed. I should have kept driving. But I needed to piss, and the horizon offered nothing better. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out. Heat rolled up from the ground in waves, shimmering like the world was warping. The building itself was just one room, door hanging open, window glass long gone. A dry stink met me, old oil, rust, maybe rat piss. Inside, it was cooler but not by much. Broken shelves. An empty mini-fridge with a cracked Pepsi logo. Dust hung in the light like static. Behind the counter, or register that looked kicked in. I stepped over a collapsed ceiling tile and found a sink that coughed up red water before going dry again. I remember noticing the silence. No cars. No birds. Not even wind. Just this flatness, like everything around me had been pressed under glass. That's when I heard it. A knock. Dull. Muffled. Like a closed fist against metal. I froze. It came again. From behind the back wall. 3 seconds apart. Not rushed. Just waiting. I moved slowly toward the rear exit. Pushed open a rusted door and stepped into a caged alley behind the station. There it was, a walk-in cooler. A commercial-grade box half sunk into the sand, like someone had tried to bury it and gave up halfway. The door was shut. No power lines. Hinges crusted with desert rot. Another knock. This time softer, like it knew I was standing there. I called out. Hello? Nothing. I took a step forward. The cooler door had something written on it in faded black marker. Could barely read it at first. Don't open it. You open it, you stay. The words were shaky. Not sprayed like graffiti. More like someone wrote it in a hurry, with shaking hands. I looked around. No footprints. No tire tracks. Just me in the cooler in the sun and that impossible silence. I turned to go. Maybe I imagined it. Long drives will do that to you. Heat stroke, dehydration, nerves, take your pick. I climbed back into the van. Tried the ignition. Click. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. And then, behind me, one more knock. Softer this time. Slower. Almost polite. Like it wasn't in a rush. I stayed in the van for a while, not moving. The kind of stillness where even reaching for water feels like too much. My hands were resting on the wheel, but I couldn't remember putting them there. The sun kept shifting through the windshield, making everything look brittle. Light crawled across the cracked dashboard, then onto my knees. The air was too dry to sweat, but I felt damp. Like the heat was coming from inside the van now. I tried the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a whine. Just the same mechanical click, then silence. I pulled my phone from the glove box. No service. No bars. No blinking icon. Just a black screen with a clock stuck at 3:11. That didn't make sense. It had been past noon when I stopped. I watched the road for a while, hoping for a car. Nothing passed. Not a soul. Not even dust. Eventually, I stepped back out. Maybe the wiring was bad. Maybe the van needed a jump, though there was no one to ask. I figured I'd give the station another look, see if there was a battery pack or tools inside. The breeze had returned, barely more than a breath, but colder now. Too cold, considering the hour. I paused before going back in, eyes drawn again to the cooler behind the building. No knock this time. No sound at all. But the cooler door was open. Just a crack. Maybe 2 inches. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't gone near it. I walked slowly to the side of the building, craning my neck to see better. The door hung slightly ajar, casting a thin strip of darkness that didn't shift with the sun. Something about the angle felt wrong, like the shadows inside were too heavy, too still. I thought I saw movement, a flicker, like someone turning away. But there was nothing. Just the door, rusted hinges holding it barely in place. On the wall next to it, the words were still there. The warning. But fainter now. Like the sun had bleached them more in the last hour than in the last 10 years. Inside the station, things had changed. There were footprints in the dust. Not mine. Smaller. Bare feet. The prints led from the doorway to the back counter and vanished. No drag marks. No exit. Behind the register, I found an old map, creased and brittle. Someone had circled a spot just west of where I was standing. In red ink. The same shaky handwriting as the cooler door. I don't know why, but I folded it and took it with me. Back in the van, the clock still said 3:11. I pressed the power button. The screen stayed blank. Not broken, just off. That's when the radio came on. Just static at first. Then, a voice. Garbled, low. One word, open. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at the cooler through the rearview mirror. The door was open wider now. I told myself I'd wait it out. Someone would come by eventually. A ranger. A trucker. Even a curious tourist. I just had to sit still, conserve energy, and ignore the heat pressing in from every side. But the air felt wrong. It didn't move the way it should have. It pressed inward, like I was inside something, not outside. And the longer I sat, the more I became aware of a sound I hadn't noticed before. A hum. Barely there. Low and steady. Not electrical. Not mechanical. Almost organic. It was coming from the back. From the direction of the cooler. I stepped out again, not sure what I meant to do. Maybe shut the door. Maybe convince myself it was nothing. I walked around slowly, my feet dragging in the dust. Each step felt softer than the last, like the ground had become ash. When I turned the corner, I stopped. The cooler door was wide open. Inside, nothing. No shelves. No frost. No blood. Just empty metal walls, dimly lit from sunlight bouncing off the sand. I could see the far end clearly. No tricks. No shadows. And yet, I didn't step closer. Because it wasn't just open, it was waiting. I don't know how else to put it. The cooler wasn't a place anymore. It was a suggestion. An invitation. I glanced at the wall beside it. The message was gone. Where the words had been, only rust remained. I backed away. Back inside the gas station, I searched for something, anything, keys, a note, a phone. In the desk drawer I hadn't opened before, I found Polaroids. Dozens of them. Curled at the edges. Faces blurred, but always the same backdrop, this station, this desert, that cooler. The last photo was of the open cooler door. Nothing inside. A date scribbled on the bottom, March 11th. The same as the time frozen on my phone. I looked outside. The sun hadn't moved. Shadows were the same length as when I'd arrived. My van was still there. Still useless. And then the knocking returned. 3 knocks. From inside the office wall. Not loud. Not frantic. Just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. I stepped outside again. The cooler door was shut. No footprints. No sound. But on the metal handle, a single red fingerprint. Small. Too small to be mine. I didn't open it. I didn't touch it. I just walked to the van and waited. An hour. Maybe 2. But the sun didn't change. Eventually, the engine started. No reason. No explanation. I drove until the sky looked different. But sometimes, when I check the time and it says 3:11, I swear I hear it again. That soft knock. Right behind me. Story 2, The Firewatcher. The first night, I thought it was just a tree stump. You see all kinds of strange shapes when you're surrounded by nothing but rock and silence. The human brain fills in blanks. A shadow becomes a person. A breeze turns into whispering. It's harmless, until it isn't. I arrived at Lookout 7B just before sundown. The trail-in was narrow, mostly rock and scrub. No signage past the old ranger post, just a rusted chain you step over. The tower sat high on a granite ledge, maybe 50 feet above the valley floor. No other buildings. No cell coverage. Just the station, a fire map, a desk, and a cot. I signed into the logbook as required. Rowan Ellis. July 9th, clear skies, high winds, 108 degrees Fahrenheit. I flipped through previous entries, mostly mundane notes. Minor flare-up SE Ridge. Controlled. Foxes near water drum. One entry caught my eye, he came back last night. No initials. No date. The page after that was missing. Torn, not cut. The room itself was plain. One window for each wall. A shortwave radio. Fire binoculars. 2 signal flares in a dented case. A hatch in the floor that wouldn't open. No latch, just nailed wood. At first, the isolation felt like relief. I'd spent the last 6 months buried in noise, jobs, traffic, other people's plans. Out here, everything was still. Even my thoughts felt quieter. That first night, I sat out on the wraparound deck. The desert cooled quickly, shadows stretching long and sharp across the valley. I remember drinking stale water from my thermos and watching the ridge below. That's when I noticed it. A dark shape. Upright. Just beyond the edge of the tree line. I assumed it was a burned-out tree or some weathered rock. It didn't move. I didn't look long. Next morning, it was gone. The second night, it was back. Same spot. Same shape. Maybe a little taller than I remembered. I stared through the binoculars, but the left lens was cracked, and the right one kept fogging. Still looked like a stump. No limbs. No movement. Back inside, I turned on the radio, just to feel less alone. Static. Then a brief tone, 3 short beeps. Then silence again. I checked the antenna. It was intact. Later, when I went to log the day's conditions, I saw another note. My handwriting. At least it looked like mine. Don't look directly at it. Don't acknowledge it. I hadn't written that. At least, I didn't remember writing it. Maybe it was already there. Maybe I was tired. I erased it. Went to bed. That night, something creaked under the cot. Just once. Then nothing. I told myself it was the wood expanding. Heat and pressure. Old buildings make noise. But still, I didn't sleep. Because when I turned off the lamp, I saw something on the glass. A smudge. The shape of a hand. On the inside. By the third evening, I stopped sitting on the deck. There was no rule against it, but I didn't want to be out there when the light shifted. The sun seemed to fall too fast in that place, and twilight carried a kind of pressure. Like the air grew heavier, though the wind had died 2 days before. I kept busy. Log temperature, wind direction, visibility. Scan the valley for smoke. Check the equipment. Routine helped. Gave shape to time that otherwise bled together. But I couldn't make sense of the figure anymore. It wasn't always there. The night before, I'd stared at the ridge for nearly an hour. Nothing. Then, without warning, it appeared, same spot, same posture, arms at its sides, staring straight at the tower. I say staring, but I never saw a face. Just darkness, like something had absorbed the shape of a man and forgot the details. It didn't move. Never once. Still, each night it felt closer. The binoculars were worse now. The cracked lens distorted the landscape into a curve, like the earth bent inward at the figure's feet. I'd stopped using them. I tried calling dispatch that morning. The line buzzed once, then went silent. No static. No click. Just silence, like the handset was still on the cradle. I spoke anyway. Station 7B reporting. Requesting equipment check. Please respond. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to hang up, a whisper came through, too faint to catch. The line dropped completely. Later that day, I found the second note. It was tucked behind the mirror above the sink. Pencil on yellowing paper, barely legible. Just one sentence. He used to work here. Before they removed the name. I didn't know what that meant. The personnel log hadn't mentioned anyone before me. No plaque. No initials. No photos. Just a drawer full of blank time cards. The hatch in the floor began creaking more often. Always around midnight. I tried wedging a chair leg over it, but the nails beneath strained with each sound, long, slow groans that didn't match wind or weight. And still, the latch didn't exist. No way to open it, no screws or handles. Just nailed-down boards and the feeling that something beneath them breathed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the cot, watching the glass. Waiting. The smudge returned. This time lower on the pane. As if whoever, or whatever, had touched it was taller now. Or closer. Around midnight, I looked at the desk. The logbook was open, though I hadn't touched it since morning. A fresh line had been added, 12:03 a.m., it saw me looking. I stood slowly. Walked to the window facing the ridge. This time, there was no figure. But in the reflection, behind me, something stood by the cot. I didn't turn around right away. I stood at the window, watching my own reflection. The shape behind me stayed still, just outside the frame of reason. If I moved too fast, I knew it would vanish. If I looked directly, I feared it might not. So I waited. Eventually, the room grew darker. Shadows stretched long and touched corners they hadn't the night before. The light from the oil lamp dimmed without flickering, like it was being swallowed slowly. I turned, finally. The cot was empty. No prints on the floor. No mark on the blanket. Just stillness. A silence too perfect, as if the tower itself was holding its breath. I sat down and opened the logbook. The handwriting was mine, but I don't remember writing it. 12:03 again. It's inside now. The clock confirmed it. Every night, that same time. Not a minute before. Not a second after. I tore the page out and burned it in the dish where we kept matches. The paper folded into black curls. I felt nothing watching it go. Not relief. Not fear. Just a strange weight in my chest, like something settling in a place it had always meant to reach. The radio clicked on around 2. No static this time. Just a hum, steady and low, like an old refrigerator. I didn't touch the dial. I let it play. A voice came through, barely above the hum. Still up? It didn't sound like dispatch. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. But the way it said it, casual, almost kind. I didn't answer. The voice came again. He stayed too long. Same as you. Then silence. I tried the door. Locked. I hadn't locked it. Outside, moonlight cut through the windows. The desert looked flatter than before, like all the depth had been pressed out of it. The ridge was empty. No figure. No trees. Just earth. I backed away from the glass. The hatch creaked once. Then again. I pressed my foot against it. Not hard, just enough to feel it push back. It did. Something moved underneath. I left the tower before sunrise. Grabbed only the map, the radio, and a single flare. I didn't file an exit report. I didn't check out. The dirt path out was different, longer, somehow. Trees that hadn't been there the first time now lined the edge. Dry. Colorless. Watching. It took me 10 hours to reach the highway. My shoes bled through. I didn't care. Weeks later, a friend sent me an article, Fire Lookout 7B decommissioned, structure collapsed. Officials blamed dry rot. Said it had been unstable for years. I still have the radio. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I turn it on. And at 12:03 a.m., a voice I know too well asks the same question. Still up? Story 3, Sandroom 6. They said the desert would clear my head, but Room 6 had other plans. Echo Pines wasn't on any map you'd bother checking. One of those roadside motels that exist only between towns, faded paint, empty pool, a sign out front missing half its bulbs. My friend Jordan managed the place. When I called him about needing a place to lay low, he just laughed and said, "You want quiet? Take room 5. Just don't mess with 6. The key was under a rock shaped like a kidney. No check-in, no paperwork. Just the key and a scribbled note that read, Room 6 stays shut." Seriously. Don't ask. I let myself in. Room 5 smelled like old air. Not mildew, just dry, and used. The mattress had a bow in the middle and the fan wobbled when it turned, but it was fine. I didn't need much. Just time, and maybe a few decent pages. That first night passed without incident. I wrote nothing. Slept hard. Woke to light cutting across the room like a blade. Desert sun doesn't filter, it scorches. The window unit worked better than expected. Kept flicking to 66 degrees Fahrenheit, though I didn't set it. I blamed old wiring. The motel had that forgotten feel. Paint peeling in the seams. The pool was empty except for a tire, and the wind carried sand through gaps in the doorframe. I swept twice, but it kept returning. Always a thin layer by morning. On the second night, I noticed something odd. There was no light under the door of room 6, but the sand outside it didn't sit still. It twisted in tight spirals, like someone had dragged a stick in circles. No breeze. Just movement. I watched for a minute. Nothing obvious. Still, I backed away. Later, I heard faint music. Jazz, maybe. Muffled, like through an old radio. I pressed my ear to the vent between the rooms. Could have been static. Could have been nothing. But when I turned back, the notebook I'd left open on the bed was shut, and the pen had rolled to the floor. I told myself I'd forgotten closing it. That I knocked the pen off reaching for water. That night, I woke freezing. The unit blinked 66 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly 2:16 a.m. I got up to shut it off. On the way back to bed, I passed the window. Something had been written in the dust. The door opens inward, but the sand never enters. I stared at it for a while. The words weren't mine. Too straight. Too calm. Not finger-written. More like traced with something dull, like a nail. I opened the window and wiped it clean. Didn't sleep after that. Tried calling Jordan in the morning. Straight to voicemail. No greeting. Just 3 seconds of silence, then a click. I walked past room 6 again before noon. The sand was undisturbed. Except for a single line, perfectly straight, leading under the door. I spent the next day trying not to notice anything. I drove into town, 20 miles west, picked up canned food, a pack of batteries, and a new notebook. I convinced myself I needed a fresh start. The old pages felt wrong. Like whatever I'd been writing was no longer mine. Back at Echo Pines, the place felt heavier. The air had that stillness right before a thunderstorm, except there were no clouds. Just dry sky and the endless hiss of heat on metal. I passed room 6 on my way to room 5. I didn't mean to stop, but I did. The sand outside the door was smooth now. No spirals. No lines. Just a perfect, undisturbed layer, like someone had pressed a level across it. No wind could have done that. Inside my room, the thermostat still flicked to 66 degrees Fahrenheit at 2:16 a.m. Always 2:16. I tried unplugging it. Didn't help. At night, the fan blades stopped rotating at that exact time, paused mid-spin, then started again 5 minutes later. That night, I woke to the sound of paper shifting. I lay still. Listened. A page turned. Then another. I reached for the flashlight. Its beam cut a crooked path across the room. The notebook sat open on the floor by the vent. I hadn't put it there. I flipped through the pages. Most were blank. The last one had a line written in tight, cramped letters. "You're not staying. You're staying behind." I shut the notebook and set it on the nightstand. Turned the fan to high. Tried to believe I was just unraveling. No voices. No strange messages. Just stress playing tricks. Then the humming started. Low. Subtle. Like the sound old refrigerators make when they haven't been used in a while. It came from the vent between my room and room 6. I turned off the fan. Pressed my ear against the metal. There was rhythm in it. A kind of breath. I leaned away. Opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a single slip of paper. Folded once. No envelope. I unfolded it carefully. If it starts humming, don't whistle back. No name. No handwriting I recognized. The edges of the paper were stained brown, like old coffee or dried water. I didn't sleep after that. Just sat by the window, watching the door to room 6 through the glass. The sand outside it hadn't moved. Not even when the wind picked up and dusted the lot. The rest of the walkways were covered in grit. Only that patch remained untouched. As if something was holding it still from beneath. The thermostat clicked. 66 degrees Fahrenheit. 2:16 a.m. The fan blade stopped. I stared at the vent. The humming stopped with it. And in that new silence, something scratched once. Just once. Slow and deliberate. From the other side of the wall. By the 4th morning, I'd made up my mind to leave. The car disagreed. It started, sputtered, and died. I checked the battery, the cables, everything I could think of. Nothing obvious. Just refusal. As if the vehicle understood something I hadn't. I walked back to the room. Keys loose in my hand. The lot had become quieter than usual. Even the insects had stopped. Room 6 still stood sealed. But now the air outside its door had changed. It felt pressed in. As though the sun didn't touch it the same way anymore. The sand surrounding it was warm under my bare feet. Warmer than the asphalt. I didn't speak out loud. I didn't knock. I just stood there, feeling something watch me from the other side. Not aggressive. Not patient either. Just there. I went back to room 5 and packed. The notebook had moved again, now sitting upright against the door, closed, with the elastic band wrapped tight. I opened it. New writing waited. We made room. You asked for silence. This is what it sounds like. The words were mine. The same looping style. The same angle. But I hadn't written them. Outside, a dust devil spiraled across the pool deck, then stopped mid-spin, like someone had pressed pause. I tried calling Jordan again. This time, the voicemail picked up. A voice I didn't recognize whispered, "We don't rent room 6. We keep room 6. Then static. The line disconnected on its own. At dusk, I sat facing the door between our rooms. The vent remained dark. No sounds. No breath. Just still metal and that same heavy quiet. But the humming returned at 2:16. This time deeper, as if it had dropped several octaves. The fan froze. Clock blinked. The room dropped cold enough that the window fogged. I sat up. The door to room 6 clicked once. Not fully. Just enough to shift the latch. I stepped outside. The sand in front of it was patterned again, tight spirals, perfect symmetry. Something had drawn them with careful intent. The handle didn't resist when I touched it. I didn't turn it. I just stood there, holding it in the dark, breathing slowly. Listening. Then I heard it. Not from behind the door, but behind me. In the lot. A soft scrape, like someone dragging something across the asphalt. But when I looked, no one was there. Only the motel. Still. Asleep. I didn't open the door. I walked back to room 5. Locked everything behind me. Next morning, I found a photo tucked beneath the pillow. Black and white. The motel in its early days. 6 rooms. Neatly spaced. Same sign. Same hill behind it. But the photo only showed 6 windows. Not 7. My room wasn't there. Only room 6 remained. I left the car and walked the highway until someone stopped. They asked if I was staying nearby. I said, not anymore. But sometimes, in the quiet between night and morning, I hear that humming. And it feels like it's getting closer.